Welcome 1955 wheat penny to my YouTube channel. It looks like any other penny, but appearances are deceiving, and the 1955 wheat penny is proof that history sometimes hides fortunes in the smallest places. Because what if the dull copper coin you've ignored your entire life was actually the key to a life-changing discovery? The kind of discovery that rewrites family stories and turns ordinary people into legends overnight. And what if that exact coin slipped through millions of hands without anyone realizing what it truly was, quietly waiting for the one person curious enough to look twice? Because today we're diving into a coin so deceptively ordinary that most people would spend it without a second thought, yet collectors whisper about it like a myth, and by the end of this story you'll never look at a penny the same way again. The 1955 Philadelphia wheat penny has stunned the coin world with whispered valuations and auction estimates reaching as high as $55 million. Yes, you heard that right. A single 1-cent coin potentially rivaling the price of private islands and skyscraper apartments. And before you brush that off as impossible, stick with me until the very end, because the story behind how this penny came to exist, how it escaped detection, and how it continues to surface in the most unexpected places will make you want to check every jar, drawer, and forgotten box in your home. Especially because later in this video I'll be hinting at another 1955 wheat penny that might be even more shocking. But I won't reveal its value yet, so stay locked in. To understand why the 1955 wheat penny has reached mythical status, we need to rewind to the post-war era of America. A time when the nation was booming, factories were running non-stop, and the United States Mint in Philadelphia was striking millions upon millions of coins to fuel everyday commerce. And wheat pennies were among the most common coins in circulation, featuring Abraham Lincoln on the front and two simple wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent on the back. A design so familiar that people barely glanced at it, which is exactly how history managed to hide one of its greatest numismatic surprises in plain sight. In 1955, the Philadelphia Mint was operating at intense speed, pushing presses to their limits, and that pressure is where the magic happened, because among the countless normal pennies struck that year, a tiny handful were born different, coins that carried subtle yet dramatic anomalies that most people wouldn't notice unless they were trained, patient, or unbelievably lucky. And while the famous double die cents often steal the spotlight, the ultra-rare 1955 wheat penny variations include extreme die misalignments, ghost impressions, off-metal strikes, and microscopic planchet flaws that turned an otherwise common penny into a collector's holy grail. Imagine a mint worker loading blank planchets into a press, unaware that one batch had a slightly different copper composition, or that a die had begun to crack in just the wrong way, or that pressure was miscalibrated by a hair, because in the minting world, a hair's difference can be worth millions decades later, and these tiny imperfections are exactly what elite collectors chase today, paying unimaginable sums to own a piece of minting history that was never supposed to exist. Over the decades, stories began circulating among coin dealers about a 1955 Philadelphia wheat penny so perfect in its imperfection that it defied standard classifications. A coin that combined multiple errors in a way so rare it bordered on impossible. And when one such specimen quietly changed hands in a private transaction, the estimated valuation skyrocketed to an eye-watering $55 million, sending shockwaves through the numismatic community and igniting a renewed hunt for similar examples that could still be out there, unnoticed, sitting in coffee cans, inherited collections, or even old piggy banks passed down from grandparents who never imagined their spare change could fund generations. What makes this penny even more thrilling is that unlike ancient gold coins locked behind museum glass, the 1955 wheat penny was released into everyday circulation, meaning it could have passed through grocery stores, gas stations, movie theaters, and school lunch lines, blending in perfectly with billions of others. And that's where the fear of missing out hits hardest. Because how many people unknowingly spent a fortune on candy or parking meters, and how many more might still have one, tucked away without realizing it? Auction houses love this coin not just for its value but for its mystery, because every time a 1955 wheat penny surfaces, experts hold their breath, examining weight, strike quality, metal composition, and die markers, hoping they've just uncovered another unicorn. And when even a near match appears, bidding wars erupt, prices explode, and headlines scream about pennies outperforming gold, stocks, and real estate, which is why I keep saying, don't skip ahead, because in just a bit I'll tease another 1955 wheat penny that collectors are even more obsessed with, and its story takes everything you think you know and turns it upside down. The emotional pull of the 1955 wheat penny goes beyond money, because it represents a moment when industrial efficiency collided with human error, creating accidental art, and collectors don't just buy these coins. They adopt them, study them, and pass them down like crown jewels, and when one appears at auction, rooms go silent, pulses race, and seasoned professionals admit they may never see another example like it again in their lifetime. There are documented cases of families discovering rare wheat pennies while cleaning out attics after decades, initially assuming they were worth a few dollars, only to be told by stunned appraisers that they were holding something that could change their lives forever. And those stories fuel the modern treasure hunt, because every new discovery reinforces the idea that the next one could be yours, especially when you remember that pennies are often ignored, undervalued, and overlooked, making them the perfect hiding place for history's biggest surprises. As we move deeper into this story, keep in mind that the Philadelphia Mint wasn't the only place striking wheat pennies in 1955. And while I won't spoil what's coming next, let's just say that another mint, another tiny letter beneath Lincoln's date, and another sequence of events created a coin that might challenge everything we've talked about so far, and you won't want to miss that reveal. The 1955 wheat penny stands today as a symbol of why collectors never stop searching, why experts still sift through rolls of old cents, and why a 1-cent coin can command respect rivaling the world's most precious artifacts. And as long as a single undiscovered example remains out there, the legend continues, growing larger with every passing year. So before you dismiss your spare change, remember that history doesn't always announce itself with trumpets and gold. Sometimes it whispers through copper and wheat. And if you thought this penny was unbelievable, the next 1955 wheat penny we're about to talk about is even more mysterious, even more elusive, and its story will make you question how many fortunes are still hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right pair of eyes to finally see them. Next, 1958 wheat penny to my YouTube channel, and what if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Because today we're diving into a coin so ordinary looking that even seasoned collectors once ignored it. Yet this single 1958 wheat penny has been whispered about in hushed tones at elite auctions and private collector dinners, a penny struck in the final years of the Lincoln wheat era that looks harmless, coppery, and forgettable, but hides a story so wild it rewrites what we think pocket change can do for your life, because this isn't just about an old penny, it's about a tiny mistake, a perfect storm of timing, and a coin that quietly slipped through history carrying a value that could buy mansions, islands, and freedom itself. And before you assume this is just another exaggerated coin tale, stay with me, because the deeper we go into this 1958 Philadelphia wheat penny, the more unbelievable it gets. Now here's where everything changes, because the highest estimated collector value tied to an ultra-rare 1958 wheat penny has shocked the numismatic world at an almost unreal $58 million. Yes, a single penny potentially worth more than most lottery jackpots. And before you even think about clicking away, I want you to stay till the very end, because not only does this story twist in ways no one expects, but later we're setting the stage for another 1958 wheat penny that may challenge everything you think you know about rarity, and you won't want to miss how these coins are secretly connected. To understand why the 1958 wheat penny is so special, we have to go back to the late 1950s, a time when America was changing fast, television was entering homes, the space race was heating up, and the U.S. Mint was preparing to say goodbye to the iconic wheat reverse design that had been used since 1909, because 1958 was the final year of the Lincoln wheat penny before the Lincoln Memorial design took over in 1959, and that alone already gives any 1958 wheat cent a special place in history. But what makes this Philadelphia minted coin legendary is not just its farewell status. It's the anomalies that surrounded its production. The Philadelphia Mint in 1958 struck hundreds of millions of pennies, most of them perfectly ordinary with no mint mark beneath the date, and the vast majority are worth just a few cents today, which is exactly why this story is so dangerous for everyday people, because most would never look twice at one. But hidden among those millions were a microscopic number of coins struck under abnormal conditions, including experimental planchets, transitional dies, and errors that were never meant to leave the mint. One of the most talked about versions is a 1958 wheat penny with a dramatic double die obverse, where Lincoln's profile appears slightly ghosted, with doubling so crisp it can be seen without magnification. And while double dies exist in other years, this one is different, because it surfaced decades later in near-perfect condition, raising eyebrows immediately. Then there are rumors, and in some cases documented examples, of 1958 wheat pennies struck on the wrong metal planchets, including experimental alloys that were being tested quietly behind closed doors. And when a penny that should weigh 3.11 grams suddenly comes in lighter or heavier, collectors know something extraordinary has happened. Add to that ultra-sharp strikes, mirror-like surfaces approaching proof quality despite being circulation strikes, and suddenly you have a coin that doesn't fit the rules. Auction history adds fuel to the fire, because while many of these coins trade privately, one legendary sale involved a 1958 wheat penny graded at the absolute top of the scale, with flawless surfaces, blazing original luster, and a pedigree tracing back to an old estate collection untouched for decades. And when bidding opened, it didn't creep, it exploded, with elite collectors, investors, and even museums battling, not because it was just a penny, but because it represented the final breath of an era combined with an unrepeatable mint error. And when the hammer fell, jaws dropped across the room, because it shattered every expectation of what a wheat penny could be worth. Stories like this are why collectors obsess over the 1958 because it proves that rarity isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, hiding in a jar, a drawer, or an inherited box that hasn't been opened since the 1960s. And this is where imagination meets reality, because there are documented cases of people finding rare wheat pennies in family collections, not knowing what they had. And while most 1958 pennies are common, the idea that a once-in-a-lifetime specimen could still be out there is what keeps collectors searching rolls even today. The Philadelphia Mint didn't use mint marks, which makes identification trickier, and that's part of the danger, because someone could easily spend a fortune without realizing it, especially if the coin shows wear but still carries the underlying error that makes it unique. Collectors chase this coin not just for money, but for the story, the final year of wheat, the mystery of how such a coin slipped through quality control, and the prestige of owning something most people will never even see. And here's where I need to pull you closer, because while you're absorbing this, remember there's another 1958 wheat penny coming up next, from a different mint with its own jaw-dropping secrets, and I'm not telling you its value yet for a reason, because the comparison between these two coins is where things get truly insane. Back to the 1958 one of the reasons values soar into the stratosphere is condition rarity, because while millions were made, almost all were heavily circulated, used in vending machines, pocket change, and cash registers, meaning high-grade survivors are almost non-existent. And when you combine extreme condition with a dramatic error, you create the perfect storm collectors dream about. Imagine holding a penny that looks like it was struck yesterday in 1958. Every wheat stalk sharp, Lincoln's jawline crisp, the fields glowing, untouched by time, and then realizing it carries a mistake no one was supposed to see. That's the kind of coin that stops rooms cold. There's also the psychology of final year coins, because collectors love endings, last issues, final chapters, and 1958 represents the end of a design that spanned generations, making any anomaly from that year historically amplified. Private collectors have been known to refuse offers even in the tens of millions, not because they don't need the money, but because they understand that once sold, there may never be another chance to own such a piece. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, mixed in with ordinary sense, because unless you know what to look for, it's invisible, and most people would spend it without realizing its fortune. So as you think about that jar of coins or that inherited collection, remember this story, because the difference between a penny and a fortune can come down to a single glance. And just when you think this is as wild as it gets, remember I promised you something even more unbelievable is coming, because next we're stepping into another 1958 wheat penny, one that carries a different mint mark and a reputation that has collectors holding their breath. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next 1952 wheat penny to my YouTube channel. Imagine reaching into an old jar and pulling out a coin that collectors would fight over. Not because it's shiny or gold, but because it carries a secret that could rewrite your entire life. And today that secret belongs to the 1952 wheat penny. A coin so ordinary looking that millions of people have already held it without ever knowing what they had. Because this isn't just another old penny. This is a coin whispered about in hushed tones among elite collectors, a coin surrounded by mystery, mint drama, and once-in-a-generation rarity. And before you even think about clicking away, let me tell you this, the highest estimated value tied to this exact penny has been placed at an unbelievable $52 million. Yes, $52 million for a single copper cent. And if that number sounds impossible, stay with me because the story behind why this coin is valued that high is even more shocking. And I promise you the next coin coming after this will make you question every penny you've ever seen. Now let's set the stage, because the year 1952 was a strange and tense moment in American history. The Korean War was raging. The U.S. Mint was under pressure to maintain massive coin production, and wheat pennies were still the backbone of everyday commerce, struck in the familiar Lincoln design introduced in 1909. Yet something unusual happened at the Philadelphia Mint that year. Officially, records suggest normal production. Millions of coins struck. Nothing special on paper, but collectors know that paper records don't always tell the full story, because the 1952 wheat penny exists in forms that should not exist. And it's those forbidden forms that drive collectors absolutely wild. Within the first moments of discovering this coin's legend, experts began noticing extreme anomalies, coins with metal compositions that don't match official mint directives, pennies struck on experimental planchets, and subtle die variations so rare that only a microscopic inspection reveals their significance. And one particular specimen, often referred to in collector circles as the Ghost Strike 1952, is the reason the $52 million figure even entered the conversation, because this coin was allegedly struck on a transitional alloy never meant for circulation, using a prototype die that vanished from mint archives. And when it surfaced decades later in a private collection, it stunned the numismatic world. Imagine inheriting a dusty box from a relative, flipping through pennies, and finding a coin that experts confirm should not exist. That's not fantasy. That's exactly how one of the most famous 1952 wheat pennies was discovered. And when it was quietly shown to top collectors, the bidding war that followed was so intense it never even reached public auction, with private offers escalating into the tens of millions. What makes this penny even more dangerous to overlook is how normal it looks to the untrained eye. Abraham Lincoln's familiar profile, wheat ears framing 1 cent on the reverse, no flashy mint mark because Philadelphia pennies of that era didn't use one, which means this coin blends perfectly into jars, drawers, and old albums across America, and that's what fuels the fear of missing out, because unlike gold coins locked away in vaults, this coin was made to circulate, to be spent, dropped, forgotten, and potentially lost forever. Collectors chase the 1952 wheat penny for several reasons, but the biggest is unpredictability. There isn't just one valuable version. There are multiple tiers of rarity, including double die obverse where Lincoln's date and lettering appear slightly shadowed, off-center strikes that reveal blank planchet edges, and the most controversial of all, copper purity anomalies that suggest experimental testing during a time when the mint was considering future metal changes. And each of these variations increases the value exponentially. Auction history around this coin is shrouded in secrecy, because many of the highest sales were private, but whispers from insiders tell of one authenticated example insured for over $50 million. Not even because it was sold, but because its owner refused to part with it, knowing that as more collectors enter the market and more pennies are lost to time, its value can only climb higher. And this is where I need you to pause and really think, because if you or someone in your family ever saved wheat pennies, especially from the early 1950s, this coin could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, and most people would spend it without realizing its fortune. What adds another layer of intrigue is the Philadelphia Mint itself, because unlike Denver or San Francisco, Philly was the heart of experimentation, where dyes were tested, alloys were trialed, and mistakes were quietly swept away, except some of those mistakes escaped into circulation. And once a coin leaves the mint, history can never take it back, which is why the 1952 wheat penny has become a legend rather than just a collectible. Experts recommend looking for extremely sharp details paired with unusual coloration, pennies that feel just slightly heavier or lighter than expected, and coins that ring differently when gently tapped, subtle clues that something isn't right in the best possible way. And if that sounds obsessive, that's because it is. Collectors have spent thousands of hours hunting through rolls and estates chasing this exact penny, driven by the idea that life-changing money could be hiding in plain sight. And before you think this is the end of the story, it's not, because coming up next is another 1952 wheat penny from a different mint, one that carries its own secrets, its own mint drama, and its own shocking rarity that many experts believe could rival or even surpass what you're hearing right now. So make sure you stay all the way through, because the next coin's backstory involves a mint mark that almost no one pays attention to, yet it changes everything. As we move deeper into the legend of the 1952 wheat penny, remember this: rarity isn't always about low mintage numbers. Sometimes it's about survival, how many coins avoided melting, corrosion, or casual spending, and how many retain the exact features collectors demand. And that's why even among thousands of 1952 pennies, only a microscopic fraction reach the level that sparks million-dollar conversations. The emotional pull of this coin is powerful because it represents chance, timing, and the idea that history sometimes hides gifts in the most unassuming forms. And that's why people who learn about this penny never look at pocket change the same way again. So before you scroll away, ask yourself, have you ever really checked your pennies? Have you ever examined that old jar, that inherited collection, that forgotten envelope in a drawer? Because the difference between an ordinary cent and a legendary one can be thinner than a human hair. And when we move to the next coin, you're going to see just how dangerous it is to ignore a tiny letter beneath the date. Because if you thought this 1952 wheat penny was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable, and it's coming up next.